Thank you so much.
Are you going to explain the format?
Thank you, Ben. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just quickly tell you what our format will be. This is how we will proceed. Each of the speakers will have 14 minutes to make their opening remarks. They will then each have 4 minutes to respond to each other's opening remarks. They then will respond to questions that you've already written down on 3x5 cards, and also questions that Ben Stein and I have for them. I am going to be something of the timekeeper. I will be ruthless at times if they go over time. So I warn you, gentlemen. We will give you a certain amount of time, but we also want to make sure we follow our schedule. Mr. Hitchens, you're up first. Thank you for coming.
Nice of you to have me, and nice of you, ladies and gentlemen, to come, and nice for Californians to lay on a day that reminds me of my English boyhood, and nice too to be in the town, the research institute of which not long ago certified Uri Geller as an authorized practitioner of the paranormal. For all the reputation of Stanford for scientific scrupulousness, there's always a little black hole through which things can, and often I've noticed do, creep. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Ben. Incredibly generous and undeserved, if rather terse and ungenerous introduction. I remember thinking I should say this by way of reply, that when we first met on the set of what was then the primitive version of Politically Incorrect, imagine what the primitive version looked like, ladies and gentlemen. I remember thinking, he's a nice guy, but he needs to live at least 2 more lifetimes just to live down his work for Richard Nixon. And, of course, for all that I wish this for him, I couldn't quite picture 2 more lifetimes for him, or I better share this with you now, even 1 more lifetime for anyone else. Now you know roughly where I'm coming from. Now I've shared that with you. Now, to the purpose, I'm not at all in search of consensus today. In fact, very much to the contrary, and I can't imagine how I'm going to be able to use up 14 minutes in demolishing intelligent design, as I decline to call it, since it's a propaganda term for creationism. But I'll see if I can waste 14 minutes on it by saying that for consensus terms, we may begin by agreeing that we are in fact here present, that we are present here as actual rational, or at any rate partially rational primates, that we are on a real planet and we are in a verifiable solar system. Let's not congratulate ourselves too much on this, but it is an achievement of a kind, and it is something we have in common. We can also agree, I think, the chances of this coincidence, or I'd better say really contingency, are fairly remote. They have this, of course, in common with other much less rare contingencies. Any of us here today are much luckier in the aggregate than would have been any comparably randomly selected group of people born 500 years ago, whose life expectancy would have been perhaps 30, and whose infant mortality rate would have been something ghastly to behold. Or if we were born in today's Congo or Darfur. However, from the observation of exactly precisely the same facts, and the same phenomena, and the same processes, it's always been possible to draw 2 kinds of conclusion, and it always will be possible to draw 2 kinds of conclusion. The first is to say that no great decider exists. There isn't a decider who awarded me the right to live while another baby 2 miles or 2,000 miles away barely lived long enough to cry before dying of diarrhea. I don't credit or blame God for these things occurring. That earthquakes and tycoons probably occur. That's what's called by some a Freudian slit. That earthquakes and hurricanes and typhoons and so forth occur not because of the will of divine punishment or divine judgment or divine verdict, but because we live on a climatically volatile planet with a cooling crust which has quite deep faults in some parts of it, including locally. That would be a better explanation, but it doesn't convince everybody. The laws of nature are never suspended. Albert Einstein said that's the miraculous, the only miraculous thing about them, that they never change, that they're completely regular. And they certainly are not suspended in response to prayer or in response to ritual sacrifices, and so forth. The positions I've just given you are my own positions, my own views. I didn't think them up all by myself, but I agree with them. Against it, you can always take the view that we are here as the result of a plan. That we are the object of a divine design, that somebody cares about us, and that this plan seems to imply an author or a designer. These same differences in approach have more recently begun to reflect themselves in the fields of biology and physics, but they are the same as they always were. Now, the supporters of creationism, and I recommend the reading of Judge John Jones's verdict. Google Judge John Jones and Dover, Pennsylvania, if you want to understand why I say creationism, not intelligent design, his ruling in the Pennsylvania court case on this. The supporters of this creationist movement have to be able to do 4 things to you tonight. Watch and see if they can. They must show first that the cosmos itself can be interpreted in the light of a design, or fine-tuning, as it's sometimes called. They must show second that our own planet's hospitality to life is not an accident, not a contingency, and thus might be serving a purpose larger than itself. These 2 gigantic attainments, if available to them, would only get them as far as the implication of an author or a designer. That's what used to be called the deistic position. To get to the position that they really want to occupy, that is their concealed agenda, if you will, their surreptitious wish, the theistic wish, they'd have to be able to show that this deity was not just a creator or designer, but took an interest in human affairs, wanted to regulate the morality of his creatures, would be responsive to appeals from them, deciding on the matter of rewards and punishments, would care whether you ate pork, would care whether you snipped the end of your dick or your daughter's clitoris, would care what day you took as holy, would care what propitiations you made to him or her. Now that is the end result, and don't lose sight of it. And the stages of initial proof, hard as they are the ones you have to watch out for in the meantime. Now, our vast new knowledge isn't all that decisive in resolving this ancient dispute, but it can be of help. I asked Francis Collins, the leading Christian who did the Genome Project, as you probably know, how long he thought humanity had been on the Earth, and I asked Professor Richard Dawkins how long he thought fully evolved humans had been present. Dawkins thinks it could have been as many as 250,000 years. Collins thinks certainly not less than 100,000. 100,000 is all I need. 100,000 years since we definitely separated ourselves from the Cro-Magnons and the Neanderthals. I'm exempting from this those of you who may have been to the new Creation Science Museum in Ohio, where you can see animatronic children playing with animatronic dinosaurs in the same park at the same time. And I'm assuming that I can exempt you from that too, sir. But be aware of what some of the implications of this are. Now, that's to say, if you believe in a divine intervention in our lives, that give it just 100,000 years, for the first 94, 95,000, people are born, they die mainly of their teeth or in childbirth or of microorganisms they don't know exist. Their life expectancy is, for the first 50 or 60,000 years, perhaps 25 years. They're killed by animals, they're killed by each other in pointless turf wars, they're killed in typhoons, floods, mudslides, and so forth. But gradually, they make slow, exponential progress. They get to the point of suffering all the time, and heaven watches it with folded arms, like this. And then 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, heaven decides we can't let them go on like this. We need an intervention. Probably the best place for it would be in Bronze Age Palestine or Egypt. Probably the best form it could take would be a human sacrifice. That might cheer them up a bit. Now, if you don't believe this, you do not believe in any of the 3 monotheistic revelations. That's what you have to believe. That's the minimum you must believe in order to believe in any of those aforesaid. And of course, it's not believable, or, shall I put it like this, it only replaces the argument as before. It replaces the argument as it was before we knew about Cro-Magnons, or dinosaurs,